Good evening, Razorback fans. We want to welcome you to another weekly women's sports resort presented by Fordham Lee Distillery and Bet Online, and we are proud to bring in former 4299 anchor and host of Scoop de Jourdon. Is that correct? Did I say that
right? You just take the Jordan off. So Scoop du jour.
De jour.
There you go.
Jourdon Black, I want to really appreciate you for coming on. It's cool having some believe love, but how's things been going? Tell us about, stepping aside and starting your own new journey and how that's been going.
Well, thank you for having me. It's so nice to share the believe love, like you said, and cross love, if you will. After moving from Fayetteville in June, I moved to Chicago, but Fayetteville was such a piece of me and a home to me as a sports journalist for almost 4 years. And I loved every part of it. I loved covering Arkansas and being part of that SEC community for so many years. So it's a really special place to me, and I'm eager to talk to you about it. I'm repping my hogs.
That's right.
But yeah, the podcast has been a passion project waiting to happen for so long. And it's one of those things, I'm sure you had the same thing. You just have to dive in, right? You just have to do it. And you have to kind of rip the Band-Aid off, for lack of a better term. Because it's kind of scary, right? To put yourself out there. Like, as a journalist, I've always wanted to do what I was doing. But the podcast thing just felt a little scary, and but I always wanted to do it. So Believe gave me the chance, and I'm so grateful for that platform. And the idea is just to kind of break bread with people who love sports like you and I, but people who are probably a little bit more in the game. And so we're talking coaches, former players, current coaches, wives, media members, all of the above. And just chatting about life and going beyond the game, as cliche as it is. And the way I describe it is, when I was in Fayetteville and when I was in Greenville and when I was in college, my grandma, she liked following, but she didn't really care if, the Arkansas women beat UConn, or if the men, beat Texas in football. But she cared about the stories people told and who they were as humans. And that's what I want to learn from people. So that's mostly what the podcast is about.
And when you do that, you go into your own, your niche, what you have a passion for, and people's going to see that. If you have a true passion for it, they're going to call out when they can see if you're BSing your way through it, or if you have a true passion for that sport. And that's what I've been able to do with this. And finally, I should have done it a long time ago. It's long overdue doing, especially University of Arkansas, and just how much success the women's sports have, and finally being able to be, and it's a 30-minute, and when you look at the grand scheme of it, it's 30 minutes out of your week, but yet to the players and the coaches and everything, it means so much. So I'm honored to be able to do it. Me and Coach Deifel were talking about that trailblazing, and Coach Neighbors, of there's not another SEC school that does this when it comes to dedicating. And it's crazy that it's 2022 and you don't have that type of show that we're able to have. So, and when you're talking about the podcasting to live, we were the exact opposite, because you've been on TV and then you go to the podcasting. I was always a podcast, hiding behind the camera, just all audio. And going to live scared me to death. The fact that you're putting your face out there, you're
right.
live. You can't do this and then go to Audacity or Anchor and edit out. If you fumble up something, or if there's a disconnection in your internet connection, or everything gets thrown at you. So it's been a fun journey, and what a better school to do it at than the University of Arkansas. And I noticed that we also have some ACC love. I noticed you're a Tar Heel fan. I'm a Clemson fan. So,
I didn't know that about you.
We have that. My dad was from South Carolina, so all about that. In the state of South Carolina, you're either Clemson or you're South Carolina. He lived in Easley, which is right outside of Greenville, South Carolina. So when the SEC women's tournament comes around, it's in Greenville. So I'll go see my family and get to do the do the tournament as well. But so when you got out of the TV side of it, how long did it take you to really, you got that itch to be like, I just need to get back into it. I miss it. What was that like, that transition?
Yeah, it's such a good question because I don't think I ever really gave up what I wanted to do. I just kind of moved to a huge sports town. I'm in Chicago now. And I transitioned from traditional sports anchoring mostly because I kind of needed a break. Not from being on TV and not from telling stories and not from being at all of these incredible events, but kind of from the behind the scenes of TV that probably a lot of people don't know about, and that you and I could do a podcast on, for a long time. And I'm sure there's some things people can garner, and there's some things that it might, sound silly to some people, but I just needed kind of a mental break from it all. And so I moved to Chicago, but I always wanted to do a podcast. I always would tell my parents, this is what I loved storytelling. Like even when I was in Arkansas, any type of feature storytelling, whether it was with a high school student at Fayetteville High or Bentonville or in Fort Smith, like I loved that. And so that was kind of where my passion started bubbling, and it always had. And we weren't allowed to, you're dedicated to where you're working, which, your time is constrained too. So when I moved, I was like, I have to go full into this in addition to the other job I'm doing now. And I was like, this is the perfect time, right, to pour into something that I've wanted to do for so long and tap into all of those connections I've made over the years through sports and through, Carolina, through Arkansas, through Mississippi, through all of those places. So yeah, I think just right away, but I've wanted to do it for so long. It just kind of takes a while. You have the wheels turning, but it takes a while to like get it cooking, And I will say, I'm the type of person, and I really wanted it to be good. I didn't want to just put it out there. And my dad's always like, it's better to, get something, what is the saying? Like get it good than perfect. But
Yeah.
it's not perfect yet, right? Like we will get there, but I really didn't want to just throw out some first episode. And so my first guest episode was Danielle Musselman. And I thought that was like a great way to kind of get some of the Arkansas fan base in on it and really kind of dive in with something strong off the bat versus, just seeing who I could kind of dabble with.
Well,
I've wanted to do it for a long time.
Talk about somebody that you're familiar with talking with. Like our first episode was Coach Neighbors because he is who I got my start. That's who let me in the door. That's when it gave me a chance to, hey, you can cover my team. You're not a TV guy. You're not a radio guy. You're just something. And so you take a little bit of pride in a Division I basketball school looks at you. You're just a podcast guy, and they let you in the door. And then 4 years later, you see how far it's grown and getting to cover, tournaments and, soccer, every women's program at the University of Arkansas. And, but you're talking about something like behind the scenes and, everybody does not realize that you can't just turn on this mic and talk. You can't just turn on this thing every day and just, there's so much that goes into what the Hog Talk is, what you have done, it's a second job. I work full-time jobs and people. So I take it personally, like you have an instance if you don't get something correct or you miss a score or miss a record, especially when it comes to the women's side, there's only a few people who do it. So if it comes out of that women's side, they're only going to point their finger at a few people. There's not 30 people reporting on the same story when it comes to the men's side. When it comes to the women's side, it's a totally different ball game because not many people's doing it. So
they're all turning to you.
Exactly. So, I do get defensive, but yet try to fix it. And sometimes I do slip up and get too defensive about it. But, it's taken a lot of hard work to go from, and when we had Neighbors on 4 years ago, we could be having this episode and the comment section would be full of who cares, it's women's sports. Hey, the men's playing right now. What do you do? And so it's so awesome to see the fans, 3,000 people at a women's basketball game. selling out the soccer stadium. And that's what we'll dive into, because with you being at the station when you started, what was the, women's programs like when you started compared to where things are now, and just watching everything grow? How cool was that to watch the growth of all these sports?
Yeah. When I started was 2018. So to put in perspective, not in line with women's, but it was the first year of Chad Morris. So, right, like none of the programs were really like being talked about entirely. It was then that following beginning of spring, winter, Anderson was fired. So that's all the men's stuff. And on the women's side, right off the bat, you're talking about how awesome it was to have Mike Neighbors on. I just like so enjoyed him from a media standpoint, his transparency, his kindness, his humor, but he also like the way he cares about his players is so evident, and it's so cool to see. And I know all of those coaches do. You can't be a coach, right, if you don't care about your players.
Exactly.
But he just articulates it so well, and it's really unlike a coach I've ever seen. There's no coach speak. There's no cliche. It's just pure heart. And it's really cool. We've seen a lot of coaches, not only at Arkansas, but, in our careers, and he's one of a kind. So his program has been incredible. So I saw them beat UConn. I saw Chelsea Dungy there, and Amber Ramirez, and there's these incredible players who like really got this program on the map. And now what I love about that women's program is, and what he's always done, because he's such an Arkansas guy, is honed in on the state and done it so well. And if you just like look at that roster, you have Bentonville, Fayetteville, Fort Smith high schools, and like any state school wants to see that, right? So I think that's so important. But then he's not just limiting that, because last year we saw how incredible the freshman of the year was, who actually went to my high school, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was actually really fun. So we always would do, at 4029, these specials, on the runs, Sweet 16 and Elite 8, and whenever they're going to the tournament. So I got to talk to her high school coach, who I didn't know. He wasn't at St. Thomas when I was there. Graduated a while ago, but that was really cool, that he's tapping into other parts of the country, but still keeping it really close to home. So I think that's so important. And then obviously softball. So you and I were talking before we started recording, just like how incredible it has been to see the softball program grow and how well they've done and how exciting they've been. And like, we couldn't get enough of them just as fans. So like when I wrapped up my time at 4029, we would spend our weekends going to watch them in the tournament. We couldn't get our hands on tickets fast enough. We couldn't get out there in the outfield fast enough. And you just like, as a media member, right, you're covering them good or bad. But when you kind of grow into this fandom, you are rooting for them so hard, and watching them fall this past year was really hard, but it was just like so awesome to see them get so close. And I think they're on the cusp, right? And you and I were also talking about just what an amazing job Courtney Deifel has done. And it's a testament to what Arkansas is. People outside of Arkansas don't know what an amazing, special place it is. But I think these coaches do a great job of selling it and bringing really, really special athletes in.
And I think you can attest to this, because you talk about Coach Neighbors being from Arkansas, but you look at Coach Deifel played at Cal, Coach Hale played at BYU. You got Coach Watson from Australia. You got all these coaches, Coach Weber, Olympic athlete. You got all these people that from all over the United States and from different countries, but they get to Arkansas. And I guess you can kind of talk about your own experience, just like it sucks you in this part of the country and this fan base, and being in Fayetteville does something, because it doesn't matter where you come from. Once you get here and start coaching here, it's like one big family, and you can say it. It's almost like we were talking when we first started recording. you can say all you want, coach speak, but when you can see they really truly believe in each other, they're truly there for each other. It has made a world of difference in the football program all the way down to, the tennis program, the swim dive team, the track and field. Everybody is thriving because everybody is treated equally. And that's what's impressed me so much with Hunter Yurchek and all the coaches is it's like one big family here.
Yeah. I like what you said about like figuring out what Fayetteville is and kind of making it home. I think a great example of that is this past year, right? I've just moved to Chicago in June, and my birthday is late September. And I was like, what am I going to do for my birthday? I have some friends in Chicago, but any girl wants to spend her birthday with her boyfriend. My boyfriend's a doctor. He was working nights at the time, and I was like, well, now what am I going to do on my birthday? My birthday is ruined. I can't do anything. Well, it happened to be the Alabama weekend. And then I was like, that's it. I'm going to Fayetteville on my birthday. And twofold in that is I made incredible friends there. And the second part is I never got to experience a football game as a fan. So that was really neat. But there's something so cool about that place. And I try to sell it to all the people who've never been there. It's, if you haven't been to Fayetteville, and obviously I know everyone listening is an Arkansas fan, so I'm sure they understand what Fayetteville is, but people who haven't been to Fayetteville don't get what it's like to be in a college town that is also just this up and coming place with so much to do, with so much to learn. There's culture and there's music and there's food and there's life and it's just an awesome place. I don't even know if I can do it justice. And I've even tried to sell it to, I have a coworker whose brother was working at Tyson and was going to get relocated to Arkansas. And they're like, I don't know. I don't want to move. And I get it, right? I'm from near Miami. So when I was my first job was in Greenville, Mississippi. So that was really tiny. So when I moved to Fayetteville, I thought it was like Oz. I thought it was, incredible moving from Greenville, which I loved. That's nothing talking bad about Greenville. Greenville was just tiny, but it's such a special place. And I just wish everyone could experience it for just a little bit.
So what was it like, okay, you go to the Alabama game, you're able to kick your feet up. You're able to eat the popcorn. You don't have to worry about being on the field and cutting into the show and doing a post-game recap. So, I mean, did it make you – because we have fans that get to go to the games maybe once a year, twice a year. But what was it like for you to really get to soak it in and be a fan for once? You have to be professional. So what was that moment like to be able to be a real fan?
It's been so nice to be a fan, just in general. And you were talking about Carolina earlier. It's been nice to enjoy watching my Tar Heels on Saturdays. And I actually, before I answer your question, I watched the national championship this year on Monday night in between hits in our newsroom, right? And that's part of the job. Like all I ever wanted to do was be a sports anchor. And it's not to say it's not still in my future, but being a fan is a really cool thing. And like you said, when you're working, you're on the sideline, you're taking notes, you're trying to make your hit that's maybe at, 9 p.m. and maybe that's when the game's going on. And so it's a funny thing to be working during something you want to watch. I've missed a lot of big happenings in games because you're on TV or you're writing something or you're trying to get something up for the web, kind of like what you were saying about being, one of the main people who writes about women's sports. Like you just have to make sure you're on and you're getting the score right and you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's and all of those things. So it's been really nice, just like you said, to kick your feet up and enjoy and relax and enjoy the pomp and circumstance. And I asked a guest on my podcast, Larry Fedora, who was the coach at Southern Miss and then UNC, and he was saying the same thing. He was like, I went to a frat when he was visiting his daughter at Alabama, his youngest daughter. And he was like, I was always, of course, on the sideline, but so in the game, I didn't even see what was on the sideline, right? Like, and, same from a reporter perspective a little bit, right? You're just running around thinking of, okay, you need to write this script, email this producer, hit this time, get this up on the web. and touch of my makeup.
So, and I had the pleasure and honor, me and Alyssa Orange, we had Sarah Spain on a few years ago.
Oh,
And
amazing.
it was just hearing her talk, and you're talking about Chicago, and that's where she's from. I mean,
Yeah.
that's her city. But I really wanted to ask you, we're talking about the evolution of the sports and the programs at Arkansas, but I want to know, what have you seen in the evolution of how women journalists are treated, how women anchors are treated? I mean, because me and Alyssa have talked many times about the struggles and what they've dealt with, 10, 15 years ago. So what biggest changes have you seen, and just how it is for a female journalist to make it in the game these days?
It's such a loaded question, but such an important one. And I've had a lot of really great experiences with people like you who care so much about women in sports, which doesn't always mean women playing and women coaching, right? It means women covering the game. And I've had a lot of poor experiences, to put it kindly. And that can mean from a coworker to a fan to a viewer to a coach. But you know what? I think there are so many people who are paving the way for women in journalism that we owe thanks to. And I'll do a tiny little plug that this week's guest on Scoop du Jour is Kate Scott, who is the Sixers play-by-play announcer. She's one of those people who's paving the way for women in journalism because there weren't a lot of people who looked like her when she was growing up. And she says that so candidly. And so I think a lot of us owe thanks to people like that because we see those women doing the things with so much grace. And sometimes there's not a lot of kindness on Twitter and even in your email at work. And I know so many coworkers that have received, nasty emails and letters even. And, obviously DMs are open and all of those things. But I think we have a lot of people to thank. And so I do think it's evolving. I think one of the things she says that I think is really important is I hope I'm not later on the first female play-by-play for the Sixers. I hope I'm just, one of them. And I think that's really important, right? So we've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
And that's why I brought it up. It's a thing that we can talk about all the good things, and we can talk about where things have went. And that's, me being somebody who's followed women's sports since 95, 96. I've seen, Linda Cohn and Doris Burke, you've seen the ones, and Robin Roberts, the ones that, and then you look at everybody who's come up, and Rebecca Lobo, and then you go to Michelle Smith and Fernandez, you're seeing more women in the sports that they cover and they've played. And it just shows that, now people are getting the respect they deserve, and they're looked at anchors. We don't have to, and I know we're still at that where there's still hurdles for female journalists, but you're looked at more now. So as a journalist, instead of a female journalist. And I think that's very important, that what we try to do. And I'll tell you, there's a sport that I try to cover, and I will not mention the sport because I don't want to bring any sport down, but there is sports when it comes to women that men, we try to dive into that sport in that realm, and we're looked down on. I tried to cover a couple of teams, and we were looked down on as men in a women's game. And I bowed out because it wasn't worth, because you're really talking to a brick wall when you're looking at, hey, I'm really caring about this sport. I've been a fan of this sport since its inception, and to be shunned because you're a male in a women's sport. But you know what? I don't take it as offense, because what I went through has no bearing. It couldn't even begin to feel what the other side of it is. So I don't complain too much, because I could sit there and throw a pity party, but I'm not going to sit there and try to compare that to what because I've seen it. I've witnessed it, seen it. I've heard it. I've seen the comments. And there was a certain instance where a female athlete was called out, and it wasn't a good situation. and you stick up for them, and it turned them to a big storm. But when you stand up for that player and those people that you cover, you're there for them. It really gains respect for the whole team, the coach, and the women's athletics in general.
Yeah, I think I'll never regret sticking up for something I believe in. And I think, that's part of the game of being a media member as well, right? Like, when you have an opinion, sometimes you have to consider whether you're going to go public with it. And it's, a funny time in the world, for lack of a better term, to kind of have all of your opinions. But I think, sticking up for something that's black and white, right and wrong, I'll never feel bad about. And I think, what you're saying is absolutely spot on. If someone's being treated poorly, and if it's having to do with being, a man or a woman or any of those things, I think, we all have a responsibility to stick up for them. And if you're enjoying the sport, especially,
that's what y'all have deserved. You've put in the work, just like we have, to stand up and be like, hey, I'm here. I mean, you're talking about, sticking up for other people and sticking up for yourself. That's your right. And that's what y'all have deserved. And you, even though you might not think it, we look at you and any female analyst anchor as somebody who you're paving your own path and you're paving your own way. But there's somebody who looks up to you and wants to be like you, because they see sports as a male dominant deal, and they see a female that's in there thriving. And like when you started your own podcast and you're coming out of your shell and you're doing that might want to make a little girl that's sitting there want to start a podcast or want to start doing stuff. So, I mean, tip the hat to everybody. And that's why a small part of me wants to do things like this. And I know that, it might not get the reception but it's quality over quantity. It's the fact that it's my passion. I don't care. And the women anchors, the female analysts, the journalists, the players, and the people who coach women's sports deserve it. And in the end, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what you're doing is amazing. And I certainly appreciate it. So I think it's awesome. And like you said, it's really cool to kind of remember that, right? Like, there were a lot of times that, you're covering a high school game of some sort, and someone comes up to you, and it does put in perspective all the years of hard work and everything that definitely makes it worth it. And you definitely have to remember that when times get tough or you feel like you forget why you're doing what you're doing. So that's probably the main reason, right?
Well, just remember Fayetteville. Remember all the hog fans. You get down.
I always will. I love it so much. I was talking to Tara Talmadge today, and she was like, "You need to come back sooner than later." And I was like, "I know. I got to put it on my calendar." Because it's a short flight away, and it really was such a special place in my heart. And people don't always get so lucky to live. Journalism takes you funny places. When I moved to Greenville, Mississippi, I was in culture shock at first, and I really struggled in the beginning, and I would do it all over again. An amazing 2 years. I had an amazing boss. That's speaking of people who empower women journalists. My sports director there was one of those humans, and it still is. And I will forever be indebted to him. But you can move to Montana, to Wyoming, to Iowa, to Mississippi, and I was coming from North Carolina, but coming from big Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and moving to Mississippi, it was tough for me in the beginning, and then it was an amazing place to tell stories like you're talking about, women's sports and high school football, whether it was 8-man or dueling rivals across the street, whatever it was. And then to be able to do it in Fayetteville, a place that I really did love from the start, was really special to me.
So we'll end it on a good note. Tell, for those who have missed the boat and seen where you're at now, tell us where we can find your podcast. Tell us, about, just what you have upcoming and where we can look forward to seeing your content. And if you're not doing a podcast, what else can we look forward from Jourdon Black in the future?
Yeah, thank you. I'm at Jourdon Black on all social media. And that's Jourdon with a U, Jourdan. It's always more complicated that way, but my mom thought it was more feminine on paper. And we have at Scoop du Jour Pod. So it's same way, Jour, on Instagram. And the podcast can be found wherever you find your podcast, also on YouTube if you want to watch it, like we're watching right now. And we have all the episodes up so far this week. Like I said, we have Kate Scott coming up, but we have some amazing guests from basketball legends to football superstars to incredible women journalists like we're talking about. And the guests we've had so far that I'd love for everyone to take a listen to are Danielle Musselman. We had Michael Deeb from the Savannah Bananas. We had Larry Fedora. And it's been a really special passion project of mine. So I'd love for anyone to tune in and let me know who you want to hear from, because I'm always open and listening.
Well, I know this kind of deviates from the women's sports, but I want to go to one of the Savannah Bananas games. I have to go. I watch their stuff, and it's all for show,
so
but
fun.
I mean and they have rules and regulations and stipulations for their players, and if you don't live up to those standards, they'll cut you. So I mean, but I definitely need to get to one of those games.
And if anyone listens to the podcast with Michael Deeb, he'll tell you one of the really neat things that I took away from it was he's a former Notre Dame linebacker who was also an incredible baseball player, but he was sidelined with injury, and then he ended up getting surgery that helped him get back into baseball. And I'll let him tell the story much better than I can, but he's so competitive. And he said, what's really nice about the Savannah Bananas is it took away some of my competitive edge and reminded me how much baseball is still this incredible game of fun. And it's fun. It's fun first and entertainment first, but it's still baseball. And so it's really cool. And he kind of shares some behind the scenes stuff in our episode, and it's a fun one. So I have to go to a game too, though. I'm going to Savannah in April, I want to say, for a bachelorette. And I'm like, can I sneak that into the itinerary?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
All the girls will love it, you know?
Yeah. Do double duty. Just take them to
bachelorette bride to be sash.
They can do a dance, throw out the first pitch. I've got you in. You let the bride throw out the first pitch. Y'all do a little dance, and then you're in.
It goes along with the wife bride vibes exactly.
There you go. Well, Jourdon, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Best of luck to you with your Believe journey and Chicago, everything that's going on. Keep the hat on, and never forget that you're loved by a lot of people here in Arkansas. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. And I won't ever forget that, because it means so much to me. So thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Well, that will do it for another episode of the Weekly Women's Sports Report, presented by Fordham Lee Distillery and Bet Online. We will catch you on Wednesday or Thursday. We're going to try to have Blake Ruffino from AYS Sports to cover the LSU game. Going to be a good one. We will catch you then.